Welcome to the Rethinking Humanity podcast, where we dive deeper into what makes us human and what causes us to thrive. I'm Lacey Delane.
I'm Sonya Larrea.
And we are so excited to have you guys for episode 29. We're coming at you from Atlanta, Georgia on this Memorial Day weekend. It is Friday. It's a Friday of a long weekend. That's pretty cool, man.
It is. Yeah, people are now being able to enjoy this. I was going to show you something, Lacey.
Show me.
Mask? No mask. We can now go outside without masks.
Yay! And I bet you money there's going to be a lot of people doing that this weekend. Do you have any special plans for the weekend?
Well, we have, and something you're going to attend, we have a birthday from one of our friends, and no, I'm just going to relax. It's gotten hot here. So I'm trying to go out in the evening or the morning, but I'll be out, whatever, just doing stuff, just enjoying, I guess the warm weather or the hot weather.
Yes. My thing is like, this is sort of like the official kickoff of summer. And so I'm like, I'm going to be at a pool this weekend. I'm going to be at a pool multiple days this weekend. I'm definitely going to do that. I mean, it's hot now. You know what I'm saying?
It is hot. Yeah.
It's time. It's time. So happy Memorial Day weekend to everybody. We hope, whether this matters to you, or when I say matter, what I mean is whether you are aware that it's a holiday, do anything special for it or not, hope you have a great weekend. We always hope you have a great weekend.
Yeah, because we have people listening from all over the world. So in America, it's Memorial Day weekend. Yeah.
That's right.
They may just be having a regular weekend, so they can have fun too.
Exactly. Have fun on your regular weekend, people. But you can tell we're in the States. We're in Atlanta, Georgia in the States. So that's where we are. Our episode topic today is called Narcissism and the Need to Relate. Narcissism. We're going to talk about narcissism today. So that's going to be fun. We have some exciting things ahead, Sonya. Do you want to share any of those?
Sure.
With the audience?
I'll talk about, let's see, the one that I think of right now is we are going to start posting on Meetup, social events for Rethinking Humanity. So check it out. I know right now we're looking at some outdoor events, and it'll just be cool to connect with people, especially now that we can be out and about. So check out Meetup under Rethinking Humanity.
Yes.
And we will put our upcoming activities on there.
Right. So meetup.com, if you don't know of it, it's a meetup like group, find people who are interested in the same things and do stuff with them app. And so we have decided to create one for Rethinking Humanity because we're going to do these social meetups where we just come and hang out with you guys. And so if you're in Atlanta, if you're close to Atlanta, if you're going to be in Atlanta, we're going to do this. We're planning to do this once a month. Of course, our awesome technical director is going to be there as well, Victor Ho. And so that'll be fun. But we're just going to hang out. We're going to drink some beer or not drink beer, whatever. And, just chat about how we can rethink humanity or not. Just be together. So that's the point. We're going to have fun. Sonya, that's the point, right?
That's the point. And thank you for explaining Meetup, because obviously not everybody knows about it. So that makes more sense.
Yeah. So be on the lookout. We're still in the process of finalizing everything, but be on the lookout. Our first meetup is June the 5th at 5 p.m. That's this coming next Saturday, actually. Man, this year has gone by fast, hasn't it?
I know. It's going to be freaking June. It's just crazy.
Isn't that insane?
But I feel like it's going to be like 6 months from now. We're going to be I was thinking about that. I'm putting away sweaters, now bringing out the summer clothes, short sleeves. But I'm like, I'm probably going to be pulling these sweaters out before I know it.
It's true. Time flies. But I think it feels like it's flying faster now in the last month because everybody's just like, woohoo, we can do some things like we used to again. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So that's great. The other thing we have going on, we've been telling you guys about it for a minute now. We're almost there, guys. We are redoing our logo. We are redoing our colors. We are not changing anything about the content. The name of the podcast is not changing, but the colors, the logo, those types of things, that's changing. So just a heads up, we're getting really close on that. And there's another big announcement that we're going to make in step with that goes right along with that. We're really excited about that. So that's cool.
Yep. Yeah. Just be patient.
Yes, just hang in there with us. The other thing that we want to invite you to do is to subscribe to us on YouTube. If you are on YouTube at all, which I'm imagining a lot of people are, to just kind of just go to our page and hit the subscribe button. We have 59 followers right now, or not followers, subscribers. That's right. And so what we're wanting to do is get to 100. So we need like 41 more. And what happens when we get there is what you can do. If we get 100 subscribers, it'll be so easy for people to find us on YouTube. All they'll have to do is go into their browser and type youtube.com/rethinkinghumanity. Right now, it's like youtube.com/AJ4986, something like that's not it, but it's something along those lines.
Yeah.
And so it'll be really easy for us to say, hey, go to our YouTube page, youtube.com/rethinkinghumanity. So we just need 41 more people. So can you please follow us, subscribe to us? Yes, we'd love to have you subscribe to us. Also, obviously now in season 2, all of our shows are available on YouTube to watch as well as listen through your favorite streaming podcast. I know some people, Sonya, really like YouTube for listening to podcasts, actually. So
interesting.
So that's an option for us, but let's see if we can get there. Yes. And we also have Melissa Bernstein, Sonya. She is coming on.
Yeah, that's another. We've talked about her a few times, and if people were listening before, we had to cancel, she had to cancel, but we rescheduled. So she's still coming, and that's going to be phenomenal.
Yes, it's got that. The title of that is called "The Power of Knowing Yourself," which I'm just excited. I don't even need to say anything on that one.
You just need her to talk.
Let me learn about that. Okay. Let's just all do this. Okay. Last thing we need to tease before we get into content is Clubhouse.
Oh yeah. Clubhouse, guys. Join us. For those of you who do not know, Clubhouse is not only on iPhone now, it's on Android, and so you have to get an invitation to get into Clubhouse. But once you're in there are tons of rooms with interesting conversations, and our room is awesome. Rethinking Humanity.
We're not biased or anything. Our room is. We're not saying that our room is awesome because we're biased or anything.
Yeah, no. But get in there. We are having some good discussions. So look for us on Clubhouse.
So check us out on Clubhouse for sure. We don't have a clubhouse. We have a club. If you heard the last episode, you heard me say that, and then. I feel like I'm, 8,000 years old, whatever. But find us on Clubhouse. We have a club. We're going to keep opening rooms, doing pop-up rooms and fun stuff on there. So come and find us. All right. So we're going to move into our content today, which is from Eric Fromm's The Sane Society. And this is a section on... we've been talking about, are there inherent needs that humans, when I say men, and whenever he says men, we talk about humans, that we all have. And so he's beginning to define what those are. And he's starting to say, yes, just like if you were going to have, a cat or some other pet, you would need to know what their needs are in order for them to thrive. We are similar in that we have needs. And in order for us to thrive, we need to be able to have those needs met. And so we're diving into a little bit about what those needs are. So this section, he talks about relatedness and narcissism, or relatedness versus narcissism. Basically, he's saying that they're two opposite poles, two opposite ends of the spectrum. But the idea is that we need to relate to other people in order to be sane. Well, we'll get into more of that. But I want to give a little outline of kind of what he says in this whole section, and then we can just have at it. But before I do that, Sonya, I just wonder if there's anything you want to add before we get into this, and any initial thoughts that things that struck you in this.
I think get into the outline, and then we'll dive into it.
Cool. All right. So Fromm starts out saying in this section that man has been torn away from his primary union with nature. And he is aware of his own aloneness. And when I say man, again, I'm talking about humans. So humans are aware of their own and our own aloneness and separateness. And that leads to a need for relatedness, for union, in order to retain sanity. So just a quick refresher on who Erich Fromm is. Fromm was a psychoanalyst and a sociologist. So he's making these statements from a place of experience in studying these things, but also working with people as a psychoanalyst. So he says there's a couple of ways union can be sought: through submission or domination, or through love. And so those are three different ways. Of course, love being the more healthy, the more actual way to be satisfied, and submission and domination, we'll get into what that actually means. But those are, you could call it a substitute, but they're ways to try to maintain union, but just no real connection in those situations. So, and then we talk about how strong is this need to relate. Well, we can see what happens when the extreme lack of that is there. And we'll get into that. So with that being the case, Sonya, take it away.
Sure. I wanted to actually just read a little paragraph, and it's from the beginning. Okay. It says, the necessity to unite with other living beings, to be related to them, is an imperative need on the fulfillment of which man's sanity depends. This need is behind all phenomena, which constitute the whole gamut of intimate human relations, of all passions which are called love in the broadest sense of the word. So this is such a paragraph to me, because I think what struck me is the necessity to unite with other living beings, to be related to them, is an imperative need on the fulfillment of which man depends. That statement right there is, it's big.
Man's sanity depends on whether he can meet the need of relating himself to other people, basically.
Yes. And I think we've lost sight of that. We're probably gaining that more after this pandemic. It's like the air we breathe and the food we eat. We are needing to be related. We need to be connected. I think you and I spoke about it, but about the infants that don't get physically touched, like in these orphanages, they actually die. So, I mean, that's just a basic, obviously connection. Fromm's going into more deeper than that. But I think we are not aware of, as humans, how important this relatedness is.
Well, and I think it's quite interesting, too, mentioning the whole infant, and not being held or not being touched, because I think that's a need that goes overlooked so much more often for many people than would be healthy. And I mean, skin, like I was reading, I can't remember what book this was in, but this is the title of a chapter of a book that I heard about recently, and it's called "Skin is a Social Organ." Isn't that cool?
That is cool. I like that.
It is cool. I mean, but the reality is that we are, as humans, we were made to touch, to connect, and that is something that we need. We need that physical touch. And it's obvious because of what we're saying here about the infant. And so that doesn't change over time. I mean, I think the impact that it makes on us might change. It's not as strong, but it's still a need we have as adults, that physical touch.
Yes, definitely. And I think the relatedness, I actually read another article I didn't mention to you, where they were talking to people going back into the workforce. And some of these individuals said they did not realize how important it was, even the times in their working, environment, how they were able to talk to people, share food, have a conversation. They didn't have that during the time that they weren't working or were not physically at work, and how lonely and how, I guess, depressed and isolated they felt. And they just, then they started connecting the dots. Even those simple interactions of relating to another human being were powerful.
Right. Man. Yeah. Rome also says this, even if all his physiological needs were satisfied, he would experience his state of aloneness. We're talking about man here, humans. Mm-hmm. He would experience his state of aloneness and individuation as a prison from which he had to break out of in order to retain his sanity. In fact, the insane person is the one who has completely failed to establish any kind of union.
Yeah, that's pretty big.
Yes. I mean, the whole root of insanity is not the ability or the inability to relate. That's a big deal.
Yeah, that is a big deal. And then, of course, we're going to go on to, I know that you talked about it in the outline, the submission. This is really interesting, the submission or the domination, which I think all of us can relate to. Yeah. Either side of that, yeah.
So he's saying there's a need in man, which is to overcome his, separateness, his aloneness through unity. And so there are several ways in which people can find this unity or this union or look for it. And one of the two ways is submission. The other one is domination. And then the way that really we get our needs met is love. But I think people, I wonder you who are listening, if you've heard the words submission and domination before and kind of like what comes to mind. And I think, I don't know for you, Sonya, but for me, it tends to be a lot more sexual in nature. Whenever I hear those two words, that's what I think of, the sexual context. But I love how he lays it out here and how he helps us understand what it means. So basically, Go ahead. No.
I was going to say the way I would think of submission and domination is kind of more in power play in a job or in relationships, institutions. So that, or I think of personalities, like there's a submissive personality or a dominant personality. That's what I think of those words. But yeah, you can go ahead and say how he kind of talks about these. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's cool to hear how we all think of those words and then hear what he says and how he describes it. So he says, man can attempt to become one with the world by submission to a person, to a group, to an institution, to God. In this way, he transcends the separateness of his individual existence by becoming part of somebody or something bigger than himself and experiences his identity in connection with the power to which he is submitted. So that's interesting. Like, okay, I can feel this sense of union and relatedness because I'm doing whatever this other thing outside of me says.
Right. And I'll tell you, okay, so I can tell you right now, because I already have obviously reviewed both of these. The domination one, where he says another possibility of overcoming separateness lies in the opposite direction. Man can try to unite himself with the world by having power over it, by making others a part of himself, and thus transcending his individual existence by not. So what I would say to you personally reading that is, if I had to pick one, I would probably fall into the submission category. But I also think our personalities, that sometimes we could fall into submissive and domination. I don't think there's like a clear line.
Sure. Like are you saying like you don't think one person is always submissive and always?
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say that through the course of my lifetime, I definitely would lean more towards a submissive side. Rather than the dominative side, whatever that word is.
I would guess that women, I'm just going to throw this out there, would fall more into the first category. Not that they couldn't fall into the dominant one, but in just the way our culture is set up.
Yeah, for sure. And this is what's so interesting about this. He says the common element in both submission and domination is the symbiotic nature of their relatedness. Both persons have lost their integrity and freedom. They live on each other and from each other, satisfying their craving for closeness, yet suffering from the lack of inner strength and self-reliance, which would require freedom and independence. And furthermore, constantly threatened by the conscious or unconscious hostility, this is so good, which is bound to arise from the symbiotic relationship. And this doesn't ever lead to any kind of satisfaction, he's saying. Right. So the thing is there's no individuation. Is that a word? Nobody's an individual in this situation. They're just like kind of leeching off of each other, like using each other. And what I think is also very interesting, he says the person driven by any of these passions actually becomes dependent on other people. Instead of developing his own individual being, he's dependent on those to whom he submits or to whom he dominates.
Right. And I think what's interesting on these is that more he talks about, the more and more it's sought. If you're in that role, you're searching for more. So that's a never ending, you'll never win there. You're going to be defeated because you just can't keep I need more. I need to dominate more. You'll never get that love that ultimately one is craving. Right.
Right. Hi, Chris Alexander. Thanks for being with us again. This is the second week in a row. He's been with us on YouTube Live. Thank you. Hi. Happy Memorial Day weekend. So this domination and submission is a popular route for finding unity or seeking unity. I mean, we were talking about this yesterday, Sonya, when we were going through kind of how we would do the episode. I wonder what percentage of people, I mean, I can think of a lot of people that, I can see these characteristics in. And I'm sure, like you said, we all have a tendency to do these things in some ways unconsciously, whatever. But I just wonder what your thoughts are on like how common this submission domination dynamic.
I think it's pretty common. I was going to try to give some real world examples here. So when you're submitting, you're having submission to a person, to group, an institution, to God. I think that's extremely common. And I think that one of the ways we do that we give up also that fear. He talks about in the beginning, that existential fear. Like, what are we doing here? And what are the rules and how do we play by them? But if you have someone or some kind of institution or structure that is telling you that helps the individual feel safer, like, oh, I have the answers. And I think that is quite common. I think that we live in a culture, especially with the patriarchy, that the domination is huge. That we see all the time. And that's sort of, I would say, trying to control like the world. Like, I think we're going to harness this energy. We're going to, we're going to do that. And that comes out as an individual or as organizations. And we're seeing where that's taken us in our climate and our structures, that we're all of a sudden realizing we can't control nature. We can't dominate, the world. And so like, this is where Fromm, it's very interesting because he's so timely, because he's saying, it's constant like feeding of, I need to do more. And we've reached that saturation point. There's no more to do.
Right. That's so interesting, Sonya. And I mean, I didn't even think about it like that. But I mean, even how we submit, like, because he says to an institution, to a group, I mean, kind of a lot of how we, the submission to corporations, how the government kind of does that in a lot of situations, and like gives all these crazy tax breaks and blah, 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 those types of submissions too. And there's an element of control in this too, this in the domination. And I think it's a projection of like, okay, I can't control myself, so let me see if I can control you. It's trying to, get to this place of just feeling safe and secure in a way that just isn't going to accomplish it. So,
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I know we're doing this. I just think also with Fromm's writings, one of the things he's doing is we're looking at all of society, but then when it boils down to it, we're having also to look at ourselves individually, because I think the empowerment comes when you have, more than one person start to look at this, look at the lens on this and start to the way we operate. And then that becomes more the collective. And at least that's my vision of how you go in and how are you changing these structures. The first, we have to start thinking differently. We have to start thinking saner. And if we're not having these conversations, we fall back into what we've always done, which would probably be the submissive or the dominant.
Yeah. And he says, so that those are the routes to kind of fulfill this union or seek this union that are not really satisfying. They don't really get the job done for what we need. It doesn't lead to satisfaction. And he says that the way that it does, the way that we are able to satisfy our need to unite is by love. Love is the way. I mean, that sounds kind of cheesy how I said it and like cliche, but he goes into, in this next little section, very specific details about what love is, which I think is fascinating. We've actually done another episode on love. We did it in February of this year, and we talked a lot about how Fromm defines love, the different types of love. Fascinating stuff. And we're going to get into that a little bit here, but I wanted to give you all a heads up that you can find this in more detail in one of our previous episodes from last season, but from this year. So, Sonya, you want to tell us a little bit about what he says about love?
Yeah, he says love is union with somebody or something outside oneself, under the condition, this is awesome, of retaining the separateness and integrity of one's own self.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful definition.
It is. That's why the domination and submission doesn't work, because the person is not retaining their own separateness and their integrity of their own self.
Exactly. Yeah. I also like that he talks about what matters is the particular quality of loving, not the object, and that love's in the experience of human solidarity with our fellow creatures. He goes on to say it is in the erotic love of man and women, in the love of the mother for the child, and also in the love for oneself as a human being. It is in the mystical experience of union. In the act of loving, I am one with all, and yet I am myself, a unique, limited, mortal human being. Indeed, at the very polarity between separateness and union, love is born and reborn. That's strong. The fact he's, explaining, he's breaking it down, but he goes back to the part that you're one with all, that you difficult. A lot of us don't probably see love that way.
So you said, we lost you a little bit there. You said, but he goes back to,
He goes back to saying, I am one with all, and yet I am myself, a unique, separate human being. And I was saying, I don't think we as human beings obviously see love that way, right? We typically, like we talked about on our other episode, the idea that both sides of that, of being one with all and yet being separate.
Yes, that's the important ingredient. That's the thing that makes it love. It's like you have your own self, you have your own integrity, you have your own space, and yet you are a part of something else. It's like you're both it's both at the same time. It's pretty cool. He also says that love is an experience of sharing, of communion, that permits the full unfolding of one's own interactivity. What do you think he means by interactivity? Any thoughts on that?
I think the interactivity of oneself, of internally within yourself, is how I'm interpreting that. I think that he tries to make love talks about love not being restrictive. Or I think we tend to culturally see it as, I love you, or I love this, or I love that. But I think he creates this idea that we love all. Like you can't, it's not really love if you're just saying you can only love one being, one person.
Right.
He actually says that. That's not really love. It's more of an attachment, you know. It's basically like he's saying loving all of humanity.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like maybe when we love others, we can recognize that we're just like them. They're just like the guy next door. No matter how different we might physically look, we're really all human beings. We're all the same. And so if I can love you, then that means I can love me, or better said, if I can love me as a human being, which is the foundation of all loving and healthy relationships, then I can love you. And if I love you and I love me, that means I love all of humanity. Because why? Because we are humans. We're the same. We're all the same. We're all human beings. And so he's saying, if you love one person, but you don't love everybody, or you're not willing to see how those two things relate, you're actually not loving. There's some type, like you were use the word attachment, is an unhealthy situation. Might be that domination and submissive situation as well. It's not really love.
Right. And just to what you were saying, I'm going to read you a sentence. In loving, I experience I am you. You, the loved person. You, the stranger. You, everything alive. In the experience of love lies the only answer to being human, lies sanity.
Oh.
Yeah, we're back to sanity.
Yeah, there's that common theme here, which is where, you know, what things help us be sane and what things are keeping us from being sane. And it sounds like one of the things that keep us sane is love. It's that, and another way to say love is meeting the need to be related, meeting the need to have union, meeting the need to connect with another human being. Because Fromm is saying, if we don't have that, we will go insane. Now, I wonder if we can picture or think about something that we know to be true that might relate to that truth. Okay. So here's what I would say about that is that I definitely have heard stories about how people who are like in prison in those like ultra isolated cells where like the only interaction they get is like when people slide the food underneath the door, you know, kind of thing. Those people have a really hard time. They're not in a place where it's easy for them to just be this happy, thriving person because they're locked away on their own. They don't have the connection that they need.
Right. And I think they know this through studies of even, you know, when you're bringing that situation up of crimes, say that someone gets locked away for some minor crime and very young, like a younger, say, adolescent, and that damages them for their lifetime because they're now isolated and they don't feel any probably compassion or attention. So to your very point, it's the punishment definitely, you know, does not necessarily fit the crime. Plus it causes a lifetime of suffering. So that's an excellent point, Lacey.
Oh, thanks. Well, you know, he goes on to talk about specifically brotherly love, motherly love, which we go into in a lot of detail on the other episode that we did on love. The last thing I want to say on love before we kind of transition to the next section, which is on narcissism, is this that he says, which is amazing. He says, productive love always implies a syndrome of attitudes, that of care, responsibility, respect, and knowledge. That reminds me, Sonya, of what we discussed about bell hooks, how she said that we will say, well, we love people, we love someone, but we don't treat them with care, respect, responsibility. We don't know about them. And I think that is a misnomer. And I think that happens a lot. Like people who are like, can't really stand the other person. Maybe they've been married for a long time and they haven't communicated well or effectively or healthily. And then they're like, you know, they actually really don't like each other very much, but then they're like, but we love each other. I'm like,
yeah, I mean, I was so funny that you picked that line because I was going to say that is such an awesome statement by Fromm that says care, responsibility, respect, and knowledge. And I agree with you. I think that's lacking in relationships, and relationships that people, quote unquote, love one another.
Yeah.
But that's not productive if you're not respecting or sense that care, responsibility. It says, if I love, I care. That is, I'm actively concerned with the other person's growth and happiness. I am not a spectator. And that's very important and something that everyone could take away from, right?
Dude, and I mean, we could even go on and read this section. I actually was going to, so I'm glad you did. I am responsible, he says, that is, I respond to his needs, to those he can express, and more so to those he cannot or does not express. Think about a mother with the baby, infant. The baby cannot express those needs, but she's listening, she's watching, she's looking. And I think that happens in other relationships as well. So he says, love is respecting him. I look at him as he is, objectively, and not distorted by my wishes and fears. Whoa, hello, people. I know him. I have penetrated through his surface to the core of his being and related myself to him from my core, from the center as against the periphery, the center of my being. You got to know yourself to really love, is what it sounds like.
That is true. That is really, really true. Well, I know we have the chapter on, the podcast on love that we do. What I do like is when he talks about, because I know we're going to get into narcissism, he does define the brotherly love, the motherly love, the erotic love. But in the motherly love, I think this is really important, I think, for families. It says to love the child and at the same time to let it go. And to want to let it go. That's a big one.
Yeah, it's a big one. You're right, Sonya. And there's a lot, I mean, rightfully so. And I'm sure it's a struggle for mothers everywhere. And I do see that when some mothers are unable to do that, it leads to unhealthy situations.
And I was just going to say the unhealthiness of allowing a child to grow. If it's getting the mixed message, you love the child, but at the same time, you have to let it go and want it to go.
Yes. And we don't mean like, ignoring a child when they're a child,
No.
But at a certain time, like it's the process of mothering. And he talks about this is at the beginning, they're absolutely fully dependent on you. And as time goes by, it's learning to let the child go and let them grow and be able to do things on their own, learn how to do things on their own.
Right. And if you think about that in your own life, I mean, the reality is that makes you a healthy human being. If you have that dependency, you can't grow.
Yep.
You need both. You can't have someone that says, I don't love you, you're worthless, then you're going to carry that with you. But if you have someone that's attaching, not letting you go, that's not helping. So the ideal, as Fromm is stating, is that letting go. Yeah.
So important. And it's so, I'm sure, I'm not a mother, but I'm sure it's a huge challenge. But those are the mothers that really are empowering their kids. The ones that are like, okay, this is my job, is to facilitate your ability to do this, live independently from me, not to be so dependent on me. Cool. Well, the last thing he talks about here is, he talks about narcissism and what narcissism is. He says, one understands fully a human's need to be related only if one considers the outcome of the failure of any kind of relatedness. So basically, what happens to people if they don't relate at all? And he says that's what that is narcissism. And so, he talks a little bit about, and I think this is quite interesting, Sonya, we talked about this, about when a baby is born, there is this season when children are, infants and whatever, primary narcissism. And so it's up until what does he say? Age 8 or 9?
Like 8 or 9. Yeah, exactly. Or 7 or 8, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
They're still existing. They exist for, other people exist for their means of satisfaction. They don't, they're still living in that narcissistic place where they're needing their food and warmth. And he calls it, I think Freud calls it primary narcissism.
Yeah. So that's normal. That's
Exactly.
healthy.
Yeah.
That's part of it. And when a kid hits 8 or 9 years old, then they can start to realize like, oh, another person has needs and they're just as important as my own. So if the growing child fails to develop the capacity for love, or loses it again, then he is basically kind of in a place where he's maybe prone to narcissism as an adult.
Yeah, it's secondary narcissism, and he actually develops. He doesn't develop the capacity for love, and they call it a severe psychic pathology. And I think that's really interesting because narcissism is thrown around a lot in our culture. And we tend to think of it as being selfish, which it is, but narcissism covers a lot of ground. And I think the reality that they're talking about here is that a narcissism is typically thinking of just his or her thoughts, his processes, his or her feelings and needs. And that's the narcissism. And that could be covered up. You don't always pick it up right away, but the narcissism exists. And then they talk about the most extreme form of narcissism is to be seen in all forms of insanity. Yeah. But I mean, it's interesting because I think there's the spectrum of narcissism. And I think we have a society that is quite narcissistic, based on what, we've talked about. That the person, it's more of the self and what can I get for myself and what can I do for myself. And I think narcissism can be covered up because the individual appears to be that they care about you or they care about others, but there's an underlying meaning or, a sub story underneath there to get what they want, because that's how narcissists operate.
Right. Well, and the link to, relatedness here is that, the narcissistically involved person, for them, there is only one reality, and that is that of his own thought processes, his own feelings, his own needs. He experiences the world outside of him, not in an objective way, only through the filter of his own mind. So basically, I've heard Fromm use this example. Someone who's narcissist or on the spectrum of narcissism might call someone and say, hey, I can see you on Tuesday at 3:00. Can you see me on Tuesday at 3:00? And they're like, no, I can't see you on Tuesday at 3:00. I have blah, blah, blah happening. And the guy goes, yeah, but I live right around the corner and I can see you on Tuesday at 3:00. I'm going to see you on Tuesday at 3:00. But they have no ability to understand that something outside of their own thought process and their own perception can be true. Yeah. So in that way, they are not able to actually relate to other people. And that right there is why narcissism, he says, is the most, is seen in all forms of insanity. Like narcissism really is insanity. That's what it is.
And I think the key, what you're saying in that story, one is kind of living in your own reality, not really understanding. Like narcissists typically lack empathy, not sympathy, empathy, where they can't be empathetic. And then they create their own world, as you were saying, like, okay, you're in my world now. And the interesting thing about narcissists, the other big point here to make is they don't love themselves. So it is very difficult for the narcissist to feel a true love for another person, or they might go through those motions, but it's never enough. They're always wanting more and more and more affirmation because the narcissist ultimately doesn't feel, doesn't love him or herself. So he or she needs that adulation.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a big deal.
Point. That's such a good point. Okay. And so, only other thing I'd add here as we finish up, narcissism is the opposite pole to objectivity, reason, and love. So when we talk about being objective, love, reason, narcissism just is the opposite end of the scale there, So yeah, the fact that utter failure to relate oneself to the world is insanity points to the other fact that some form of relatedness is the condition for any kind of sane living. So
like
that's
that.
powerful. And I think I'd love to hear your thoughts as we finish up here, Sonya, on how that might fit into a society being insane.
Some form of, well, I like the part of some form of relatedness. So the insanity part is, I think, the unrelatedness that we have sort of grown culturally, that we don't need to be related. We can, we can be with machines that we've talked about on this podcast. We can be separate, where we can do things alone. We can't do anything alone. And so there's this sort of illusion that we're just these separate identities that don't, entities, not identities, that don't need one another. And we have to realize that we're stronger together, and that we also need that as much as, like I said earlier, that we need food, air, water,
right?
All of that. We also need the relatedness. Yeah, I like the word relatedness. And to your point in the beginning, the skin being another part of our essential body.
Yeah, like it's a social organ. I love that. I love it. Yeah. If you ask single people in America if skin is a social organ, many of them would be like, no. You know what I mean? But anyway, so yeah, that is narcissism and the need to be related. So as we continue with this section and this topic, we're going to talk more about what some of these needs are that Fromm identifies in humans. And so this one is the need for relatedness and union. And I wonder if, you guys can, think about whether you agree with this and what your thoughts are. And obviously you're always more than welcome to share your thoughts with us. We always want to hear, but we want to thank you for being with us. We hope you have a great holiday weekend or non-holiday weekend. Anything else in closing, Sonya?
Yeah, I just think this is a super topic. I think a lot of people relate to narcissism and to the part of relatedness, and love is also a good topic. So yeah, check us out, add any comments, write to us,
subscribe
to us, go to Clubhouse, go check our meetup. We got a bunch going on. So, or just listen to us on your podcast. Whatever podcast stream you listen to. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yay. Well, we appreciate you guys. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next time on the Rethinking Humanity podcast. Bye.
Bye, guys.